Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Development Control Committee meeting. We'll just have a few housekeeping points to note, and then we'll start with proceedings. There's no fire alarm scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, it's for real. Please evacuate the building as soon as you can through the nearest available exits. These are towards the back, with the doors going out from the audience chamber and two exits behind me. Exit through reception, and we meet in the War Memorial Park. A reminder that this meeting is webcast. It's being webcast live on the internet and will be available to view on YouTube after the meeting. And if we do have any mobile phones, I'd appreciate if they're switched off or turned to silent. So we'll now move on to the business in hand. Just a brief explanatory note. Development Control is a quasi-judicial committee where councillors are acting in an apolitical capacity, making decisions on applications based on planning law. These are rooted in policies in our local plan and the National Planning Policy Framework. Seated to my left are planning officers who will be offering their expert advice through the evening. Seated to my right hand, we've got head of legal to make sure that everything's above board. My vice chair, and then towards the right we've got councillors who will be making the decisions and voting. So without further ado, I shall open proceedings with item 1. Do we have any recorded apologies for absence? Yes, Councillor.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's sadly I must consider myself to be predetermined on the subject which is being dealt with item 2. I shall therefore remove myself from the chamber for the duration of that item. Thank you.
Noted. Thank you very much. Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Chair. On item 8, although it is in my ward, I feel I'm predetermined on that, and therefore will remove myself from the item from the chamber. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, item 3, urgent matters. There are none. Item 4, minutes of the last meeting. I believe we've got a note to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So it's just a note to members at the committee meeting on the 8th of November where you considered the Winklebury Regeneration Scheme application 22-1934 FUL. The officer recommending and presenting the application confirmed in a verbal update that there would be a phasing plan secured in the section 106 as well as conditions. That did not make it through to the final versions of the minutes before the Chair, so it's just to make that point that they should be captured in the minutes as an amendment before confirmation.
Okay, thank you very much. Duly noted. Do I have a mover for the minutes as amended? Councillor Rattigan, seconded Councillor Robinson. Are we all content with the minutes? Who agreed? Excellent. Thank you very much. I shall now sign those as a... So next up is item 5, applications for planning permission and public participation thereon. And the first item up, number 1, is land adjacent to Bourne Valley Inn, Upper Link at St Mary Bourne. And if we could have the officer to introduce, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a full application for the erection of 2 dwellings with associated access, parking, turning, landscaping and private amenity space on land adjacent to Bourne Valley Inn. Members will recall that this item was deferred from the June Development Control Committee for the applicant to provide information on sewage disposal and surface water, along with consultation with the Environment Agency and Southern Water. Since the deferral, the applicant has provided a flood risk assessment and the relevant consultations have been carried out. Draw members' attention to the update paper, where you would note 4 further representations have been received since the report was finalised, and they're raising matters of concern in relation to drainage and the flood risk assessment itself, along with other related matters, and those points are summarised in the update paper for you. Members will note from the main report that both the Leeds Local Flood Authority and the Environment Agency have confirmed that since the proposal is for minor development, it falls outside their remit to provide comments. Southern Water have advised that a build-over application will be required if the development would be located within 3 metres of the sewer, and an informative is attached to this effect. Officers are satisfied that the flood risk assessment that has been submitted since the deferral of the application concludes that the development can be carried out to be flood resilient and that it would not lead to increased flood risk. The proposal is therefore for recommendation to approve the application, subject to the completion of the agreement in relation to the wood implementation and management plan for nutrient neutrality and the conditions in the main paper.
Thank you very much. So we have no public speaking on this deferred item. Do we have any questions from councillors for officers? Councillor Rattigan?
Thank you, Chair. Have there been any substantive changes to the conditions? Because I'm afraid I don't have June's papers. And obviously there's 20 within it.
Yep, so the original report is in the main agenda pack as well, but it's just condition 20. Let's just get to... So the condition 20 has been amended from the original condition to require development to be carried out in accordance with the flood risk assessment that's since been submitted.
Any further questions for officers? Okay, we'll move on for debate. Do I have anyone to move? Councillor Falk?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, reading the update papers, I'm not totally convinced that the sewage and the flooding has been handled sufficiently in detail. It seems to be a bit, yeah, we'll do that or we'll do this, and conscious of the fact that there are tankers permanently stationed in the Bourne Valley to pump sewage from St Marybourne. You know, it is a very serious issue, and frankly, I don't get a great deal of comfort from the update paper on this point.
Okay, Councillor Rattigan?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. And just on to Councillor Faulkner's part, the Bourne Valley Inn has no restrictions on the number of people using the toilets or the facilities there, and therefore any strain on the sewage would obviously would be affecting them as much as anyone else. Having read the papers now twice, because obviously we had the opportunity in June, I think the mitigation and the flood risk assessments have been done, and it's a moderate expansion of a small hamlet. It sits in between 2 areas of development, obviously abutted by one, the inn, but also housing on the other side. And I think the fact that the officers have gone through this twice indicates that they've got no great concerns on it. It looks through the conditions that they are adequately protecting the Bourne Valley, and a small increase in the housing in any hamlet is to be welcomed because it's organic, and I think there is much to commend this, as it's only 2 homes, and therefore I am happy to move the recommendation as outlined in the papers.
Thank you very much. We have a motion moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hussey? Okay, and we'll move to vote. Those in favour, please show. Those against? 3. Okay, if we could have the decision, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The application is approved, subject to the agreement and conditions set out in the main paper.
Thank you very much. Moving on to application number 2, land at Pyatt's House in Pyatt's Hill. Councillor Goddison, you are vacating the chamber. Okay, if we could have the officer introduction, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a full application for the erection of 2 4-bed dwellings with associated garaging, parking, turning, landscaping, private amenity space and access on land at Pyatt's House, Pyatt's Hill. Just draw your attention to the update paper. We have written confirmation agreeing to the pre-commencement conditions, which we received today, and one verbal update with reference to condition 1, which lists the approved plans. Just to correct, the reference to the block plan and plot 1 garage plan should be removed from this condition. They are superseded drawings. Members will note from the main report a number of previous applications for residential development at this site have been refused, and one scheme for 9 units subsequently dismissed at appeal. The last application was for 4 units and refused by this committee in August 2021. As members considered the proposal would erode the rural character of the site, resulting in harm to the conservation area and the Park Pale scheduled monument. This application has been submitted to address those concerns. The number of dwellings has been reduced to 2, and they have been sited further from the scheduled monument to the east. No objections from consultees, including Historic England, subject to a number of conditions. Officers consider the latest scheme overcomes previous concerns raised by committee, with the planning balance exercise undertaken at page 136 of the main report. The recommendation is therefore for approval, subject to the conditions starting at page 137 of the report, with the amended condition 1.
Thank you very much. I believe we have Councillor Roger Doust from the Parish Council to speak. Welcome to Development Control. If you want to sit down to your right there, yeah, any one of those 2 seats there. You press the right hand button, and when you're ready, you have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors, for permitting me to address you this evening regarding this application, which is strongly opposed by Old Basing and Lichbit Parish Council. This evening I represent not only the Parish Council, but 43 residents of Pyatt's Hill, the road concerned. Our 4 main objections to this proposal are that 1, it is in breach of the village design statement, which is contained within the accepted neighbourhood plan for Old Basing and Lichbit Parish Council, in that these proposed houses fail to meet the criteria identified. Brick and timber framed cottages and barns, roofs that are hipped or half hipped and have small wood painted windows. Secondly, the parish is a rural one, and we wish to retain as many mature feature trees as possible. The building of these 2 detached garages associated with the 2 houses and the new driveways would likely mean the possible felling of a number of mature oak trees which currently form part of a continuous line of such feature trees. We know that if this development is permitted to go ahead, it is proposed to reinstate similar trees at a later date, but they would in no way replace these trees that are a feature of this garden and the surrounding area. We have previously mentioned in the 2 previous appeals to this council, Park Pale is an ancient monument of which there are few within the borough. The monument is believed to be only one of its kind in Hampshire and is considered to be of high significance. This proposal means building of the new driveways across the monument, and even if it is carefully protected by building of the houses, future owners of the buildings may be unaware of its presence and build extensions and other structures over it, thus causing further damage to the monument. The report from Historic England states that this development will cause some harm, but less than significant harm. We interpret this as saying that if the development goes ahead, it is likely that this will cause some harm to the monument. Some harm to this one monument. If another significant monument, such as Stonehenge, was in this borough, would we allow any significant harm to come to a monument at all? This is a monument that is significant in this borough. The possible increase of traffic down this quiet country lane would cause disturbance and congestion, particularly as this proposed development is at the far end of Pyatt's Hill, and any extra vehicles would need to pass the whole length of the upper part of Pyatt Hill.
You've 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. We respectfully ask you to consider our fears this development will bring to this quiet area, and we fully support the arguments put forward by the neighbours and other residents of this quiet country lane. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions, Councillor Rettig?
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder when the neighbourhood plan was made. Is it now out of date or is it still
No,
current?
it is one that at the moment is current and is being redone at this present time, and I think it's due for be completed next year.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, good. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Which button?
Right hand side. Okay, and if we have Mr. Tom Little speaking in objection, welcome to Development Control. Sit down, and the button on your right, when you start, you've got 4 minutes. Thank you.
Tom Lytle from 26 Pyatt's Hill, representing 45 voters who live on and around Pyatt's Hill. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you tonight. Your membership on the DCC means that you care about the quality and type of housing that is needed in Basingstoke, and that the right amount of houses are built in the right place, and ensuring no harm will occur to any existing scheduled ancient monuments or conservation area. You will know that 3 previous applications have been refused by this DCC. One has been confirmed by an outside independent inspector appointed by the Secretary of State. As to this application, we feel that the planners have got it wrong again. 32 letters from 55 registered voters object to the application. Only 4 voters agree, meaning the wrong houses are in the wrong place and the development will cause harm to the Old Basing Conservation Area and the entrenchment. David Wilkinson of Historic England stated in his letter on the 11th of November 2022 that less than substantial harm will occur to the Pyatt's Hill entrenchment, even with the proposed management plan. His comments in your committee report are incorrectly noted. 6 members of the Planning Committee are against this, from the Parish Council. 2 Basing councillors object, Councillors Kubert and Tuck. Heather Rainbow, the chair of Cycle Basingstoke, objects. And of course, the residents. Technically, but not counted in these votes, is the DCC. I will cover this in a minute. Of major concern is the damage that will occur to the Pyatt's Hill entrenchment, a scheduled ancient monument which should be protected by the Ancient Monuments Archaeological Areas Act of 1979 and updated in 1983. This states an adverse impact to an entrenchment like the Pyatt's Hill entrenchment might only be accepted in wholly exceptional circumstances. I hope you will agree with us that this development, two new houses, are not in wholly exceptional circumstances. As the monument is believed to be the only one of its kind in Hampshire, and is considered to be of high significance for its aesthetic, communal, evidential, and historical value. Even the minutes of the DCC's refusal of the previous application on the 10th of August 2021 confirm this. Chaired by Councillor Robinson, the DCC members were concerned by the inclusion of the entrenchment within the gardens of the 4 proposed houses, as well as the nearness of the houses to it. The application was refused. My question to you was, has this application taken your concerns to heart and acted upon it? No, no, it hasn't. 72.5% of the entrenchment that was included in the garden of these previous 4 houses will again be incorporated in the garden of the 2 new houses. The houses will only be 8 and 5 meters from the trench. Another question.
1 minute left.
Well, yeah. Another question, is the applicant and his outside developer exempt from the Monuments Act while others are complying? We don't think so. We hope you do. Such as Brian Holmes built the Lily Mill China State immediately to the north of Pyatt's house and respect the act and the entrenchment and had provided a 20-meter buffer between it and the front of the houses. Joanna Bromley of the borough's forward planning team will ensure that future buildings provide at least 20-meter buffer between the entrenchment and the houses built on the land of east of Basingstoke. The comments of refusal by the independent inspector, Jonathan Hockley, are appropriate to this application as they were to the first. Less than substantial harm does not equate to less than substantial objection, and as unique conservation areas and heritage assets are irreplaceable, any harm or loss should require clear and convincing justification. He was not convinced. 55 people also feel there is no clear and convincing justification for this application.
Could you sum up? You're out of time.
Yes, sir. And feel it is the wrong houses in the wrong place and will cause harm to the entrenchment and the conservation area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any questions, councillors? I don't see any hands raised. Okay, thank you very much for your contribution. Okay, and speaking in support, I have down Mr. Mark Pettit and Mr. Hugh Freeman. Welcome to Development Control. When you're ready, you have 4 minutes between you and the button on your right will start.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mark Pettit. I prepared and submitted this planning application. Sat alongside me is one of the applicants, Dr. Hugh Freeman, who's resided at Pyatt's house with his wife Meg since 1990. The application that's before members seeks full planning permission for the erection of 2 dwellings on land that currently forms part of the side garden to Pyatt's house. It's recommended for approval and we fully support this recommendation. Now, some members may be familiar with the site as it has been the subject of a number of applications in the past. Most recently, the site was the subject of a planning application back in 2021, where permission was sought to erect 4 dwellings on the site. The application went to committee in August 2021 with a recommendation for approval, but it was refused by members for reasons relating to the suburbanisation of the site and erosion of the site's rural character, harm to the character and appreciation of protected designated heritage assets, the impact on the Pyatt's Hill entrenchment scheduled monument, that the proposal will neither preserve nor enhance the character and appearance of the Old Basing Conservation Area, and the lack of an affordable housing contribution. In all other respects, the scheme was considered acceptable. The council's decision was not pursued as an appeal. Instead, the applicants decided to submit a fresh application to overcome the concerns expressed by the committee back in 2021. With this in mind, the current application has been with the council since May last year, and over the past 18 months or so, we have worked with the officer to agree an acceptable scheme for the site. To overcome the first reason for refusal, we've decided to reduce the numbers of dwellings on the site down to just 2. Thus reducing the overall impact on the conservation area designation and the scheduled monument to the east. We've positioned the houses further to the west so that there is greater spatial separation with the scheduled monument. It also reduces the amount of trees on the site for removal to just a handful of poor quality specimens, no oak trees. The southernmost plot has also been positioned further to the north, a greater distance away from Pyatt's Hill Copse to the south. As was the case with the previous application, this current proposal has been accompanied by a heritage management plan. This is a detailed plan which outlines the measures that will be taken going forward to ensure that the Pyatt's Hill entrenchment, which is a scheduled monument, is safeguarded. The aim is to ensure the monument's long-term protection. This will be achieved by, amongst other things, incorporating low-impact fencing and preventing any landscaping or garden structures on the monument in the future. Furthermore, the interpretation of the monument will be enhanced through the provision of an information board. This management plan has raised no objection from Historic England, and suggested condition number 23 at page 142 of the committee report will ensure that the development, if approved, is undertaken in accordance with the management plan. In terms of affordable housing, there is no need for a contribution to be made in this instance, as the proposals fall below the threshold. There are no technical reasons why this application should not prevail. There's been no objection from Highways, the landscape team, the tree officer, the biodiversity officer, archaeology, waste, environmental health, or the council's conservation officer. And Historic
Got 1
England
minute left.
have assessed the harm as just minor, and again raised no objection. In summary, the site provides a fantastic opportunity to provide much needed housing within the borough at a time when the council cannot demonstrate an adequate supply. The current scheme is different to those presented at committee in 2019 and 2021, and we hope that members appreciate the efforts that have been made to overcome the concerns expressed previously, along with the benefits of providing a management plan for part of the scheduled monument and a habitat net gain of over 11%. We believe that this proposal responds successfully to the sensitivities of the site, and certainly the positive consultation responses and the officer's recommendation would suggest that it has. The site falls within the settlement policy boundary of Old Basing, next door to a large 450 dwelling strategic housing allocation, and is a logical site for a modest residential scheme such as this. We therefore respectfully request that planning permission be granted accordingly in line with your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any questions from councillors? Councillor Rattigan.
Sorry, Chair, I'm always at it. Can you just confirm the reduction in footprint or hard standing that the reduction from 4 to 2 means? And I have another question after that.
I don't know the reduction in the footprint. Obviously, we've reduced the numbers down by 2. So I would have thought somewhere in the region of 30 to 40%. We've removed the semi-detached houses that were proposed before, which were a pair of, I think it was 2-bed houses, I think, from memory.
Thank you. The proposals to have 2 detached 4-bedroom dwellings in traditional construction of brick and clay, do we have the skill set to produce homes like that? Because obviously these are traditional homes, and it is particularly difficult to deliver that sort of home.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure I understand what the question is.
Do you you must have thought about who would construct these homes? They're in traditional style of brick and clay, tiled, and timber. So have you sourced people who will be able to build that quality of home?
We're not really at that stage in the project, really, and we're not that far down the line. I can't imagine we would have designed something that we didn't think could actually be built on site.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. The Park Pale entrenchment, is that within the gardens of the proposed houses, or is it outside of the gardens of the proposed houses?
It's within. Yeah, as is the case at the moment with Pyatt's house. The entrenchment falls within the curtilage of that house.
Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Chair. Both the parish council and the objector talked about the trees, and you mentioned something about a few scrawny trees would be removed. When you say a few, what are you talking about, please?
We're proposing to remove 4 trees. One is an apple tree, so just a fruit tree. That was category C/U. And then there's 3 further trees down at the bottom. One's a hazel, that's a C grade tree. There's an ash that's a U grade, and there's another ash which actually I think is showing signs of ash dieback, which again is a U grade tree. So none of the trees we're removing are oak trees. None of them are of any particular arboricultural retention value. And again, the council tree officer has raised no objection to the proposal, which actually was the case on the past 2 applications where more trees were being removed than what we're showing now.
Any more questions? Okay, I see no hands. Thank you very much for your contribution. Questions for officers? Councillor Howard-Sorrell?
Thank you, Chair. If we approve this, can we condition removal of permitted development rights to protect that pale, whatever it's called, in any way, or?
Yeah, we've already intending to do that. It is, just get to the right. Yeah, condition 27 on page 143. And 28.
Mr. Robinson?
Thank you, Chair. Very similar question. If I read the HCC archaeological report, it asks for a condition to secure an archaeological watching brief during the relevant stages of the development. So if this does go forward, can we add the condition to cover that, please? Thank you.
Yeah, there are 3 archaeological conditions proposed, 20, 21 and 22, but we could include that should members reach that decision.
Any further questions for officers? I see no hands raised. Okay, so we'll proceed to debate. Councillor Robinson?
Thank you, Chair. I was, as has already been referred to, I think I was fairly instrumental in the last refusal on this, and the reason I recommended it for refusal is because Park Pale is in the gardens of the proposed houses. I appreciate that it's in the garden of a house now, but that's a massive garden with lots of space to do all sorts of things any way you want. These are small gardens, so there's limitations as to what you can do anywhere, and I think having a scheduled monument in somebody's small garden is inevitably going to end up, sooner or later, it's going to get dug up for a flower bed, for a patio, for a garden shed, all sorts of other things like that. And that's not changed. My objection was backed up by the inspector. So, and they haven't changed it. So I can't see that it's any different. The houses are different, but we've still got Park Pale in a small garden, and the council says we will monitor it. We won't. We are incapable of monitoring that effectively. And for that reason, and for that reason only, I move for refusal. Thank you.
Okay, and we have a mover for refusal. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Frick? Anyone else wish to contribute something before we move to vote? If we could. Yeah, can you expand on the reasons, Nick?
The lack of protection that this will inevitably result in the destruction of a scheduled monument of the highest significance.
Thank you, Chair. It's just before members take the vote on, because I appreciate it's been moved for refusal on those grounds, it's just in relation to the sort of commentary around that, which I fully respect Councillor Robinson to put that motion forward. Insofar as the previous appeal decision was obviously in relation to a materially different scheme. It was a scheme for 9. I think if we can just show that on the visualiser plan. Yeah, so that was the scheme for 9 houses. Now, I fully understand the point Councillor Robinson's raised insofar as it's still within smaller gardens than they are at the minute, but it's necessary for you to be clear that it was a materially different scheme that the appeal inspector considered. The other aspect that in terms of material change between the applications is the the plan that's been submitted, the Heritage Management Plan, which has been found to be acceptable to Historic England when they've viewed this application, and the conditions that we've suggested can be imposed. So those are all matters that you would need to consider, because when you consider an application, obviously you need to have in mind whether conditions can make something that could otherwise be unacceptable, could make it acceptable. In the officer's report and the officer's view, clearly that threshold has been reached by the condition that we've suggested in that regard.
Councillor Vatican, did you have your hand raised?
I did, Chair. I have to disagree with Councillor Robinson. I think this is a modest addition on a very large plot. Obviously, I wasn't here for the decision on the previous application, but I think the the fact that there is a management plan for the historic monument, and that we can see from the visualizer that the reduction in scale, scope, bulk, size of the application on this site leads me to think that, along with officers, I am in support of the application.
Councillor Bound?
Yes, without wanting to repeat what Councillor Rattigan has just said, I basically agree with what he said. I do remember going there back in maybe 2018 and looking at the site, so I am sort of vaguely familiar with it. I am satisfied with the officer's report and the Heritage Monument Management Scheme which has been submitted. The applicant has covered the trees, which I think were a concern, and I think on submissions that I've seen in terms of traffic, there are only 2 houses. I don't think it's going to add overly to the amount of traffic using that lane. So I'm fully in favour of the application.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, you want to come back?
Just very briefly, I completely understand what Mike has said about the changes to the scheme, but within those changes, the public benefit has also changed. It is a very, very small contribution to our housing supply. It's only 2. So I still come down in the to the opinion that the damage outweighs a very, very small contribution to our housing supply. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we have a live proposal on the table, so I'm keen to move to vote now. All those in favour of refusal, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do we have a counter proposal?
Chair, on the basis that that refusal has fallen, I'm happy to move the officer recommendation with the conditions as they stand.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Bound.
Chair, can I just clarify in terms of the motion, was that with this suggested amendment to the condition in terms of the watching brief element?
Yes, the conditions added from my fellow councillors.
Okay, now moved for approval. Those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That puts us in a very difficult position. Okay, we're going to have a legal now speak.
Chair, I'm going to suggest that we defer so that we can have discussions with the applicant. It occurs to me that maybe if there was a Section 106 agreement with each owner as they acquire the land having to enter into a direct covenant with the local authority that they will observe by the terms of the management plan, then perhaps you could be more reassured that there wouldn't be works on the management plan, you wouldn't be worried about enforcement. But I think that's a conversation that's better had outside the room, and then it can come back to members. Do you want to move it from the chair?
Okay, so I'll move from the chair, deferral on those grounds. Do I need a seconder? Can I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Freeman. Those in favour of deferral, please show. Okay, I think that's unanimous. Item deferred to future meeting.
Yeah.
Is Councillor Robinson coming back?
He's gone to get Sven.
Oh, right, okay. Okay, welcome back, Councillor Goddison. And so we'll move on to the next item. 3 has been withdrawn from the agenda. That's Oak Cottage, Aldermaston Road, Pamber Green. So we'll now move on to item 4, Lower Manor Farm, Church Lane, Ashmansworth. And if we could have the officer introduced, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a full application for the removal of the existing dwelling and agricultural buildings and structures and the erection of a replacement dwelling with a courtyard of ancillary buildings and ancillary associated works. The application is recommended for refusal for landscape impact and there being no overriding public need to outweigh the need to safeguard bats. So in terms of an update, Councillor Falconer referred to another site in Ashmansworth, which he emailed us, and considers that this refusal is contradictory to that. There is a slide on the visualiser, if we get that up, which shows the distance of these sites and how the character area differs from the built-up cluster to a more sporadic open landscape. It's also reminded that every application is assessed on its own merits. The officer has carried out a thorough assessment included within the agenda paper, and this is in conjunction with objections raised from the principal landscape architect. In addition to that, the agent has provided an updated dusk emergence and pre-dawn re-entry survey relating to bats. This report has been modified to show how the proposed ecological mitigation would be integrated into the revised scheme. Following consultation with the biodiversity officer, it is considered that this amended information and the proposed mitigation would be acceptable. Therefore, reason for refusal 2 has been updated to remove reference to failure to provide mitigation to offset the loss of bats. However, it is reminded that the scheme still fails to meet the legal tests as there is no overriding public need for the proposal, has not demonstrated that. So the updated wording for reason 2 is covered in the update paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the Parish Council, we have Alan Cox. Welcome to Development Control. Speaker button's on your right. Once you're ready to speak, you'll have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Alan Cox, Chairman of Ashmansworth Parish Council. Ashmansworth is, to me, a very special small village, one of the smaller ones in the borough. And so we are keen to look after it and preserve its character. Lower Manor Farm buildings are becoming largely derelict and obsolete with changing farming use. They are unused and uneconomic to repair. The attached farmland is being used primarily for grazing sheep, so they no longer need a load of old barns. And those who came to see it the other day will realise that they are, in fact, in a worse state than I had realised myself. The applicant, who's owned the property for nearly 25 years, so he's a local guy, sitting over there, wishes to replace it with a modern house built on a brownfield site. The house is smaller than the existing barns and less high than the tallest. It's set well back from the road to reduce prominence, and there's no impact on any trees. There are quite a few trees around there, and they are all being preserved. They provide a welcome site we have a lot of trees in Ashmansworth. Permission has already been granted for other more prominent houses, each on the main entrance roads to the village, and far more visible to passers-by. Manor Farm buildings is 50% larger. It's a huge thing, and will dominate the main entry roads from Highclere and from East Whitwick. That's in the process of being built. Fieldway is about the same size as the present application. It's the first house you see on entering via Cross Lane, and again is a major point. It's the first thing you see, a big building in the village as you enter the village. There's another one, Charldown, is by the Wayfarers Walk. You don't actually see it from the road, but the Wayfarers Walk is well known, historic, and it's a hoof house, so it's all glass, and it's similar size to the present application. So there is precedent for having such buildings, and these are all in the last few years and one from about 20 years ago. The present application is set well back from the road, which is at the far end, the bottom of the village, and has very little traffic on it because it's so narrow with very few passing places. You have to be very determined to go through there. One of our councillors had his car written off by a white van who was driving far too fast. The officer's report, I feel, is slightly misleading. It claims that the house is elevated. Well, the whole village is the highest in Hampshire, so yes, it is technically elevated. But in actual fact, it is the lowest in the village. It's something like 100 metres lower than the highest.
You have 1 minute left.
So, and it's right at the limit of the conservation area. The land actually goes just outside, but the building will be just inside. There's only a very short stretch of the Andover Road where the house will be visible, at 700 metres distant. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever driven down the Andover Road, but it frightens us all. It has a lot of accidents, and you have to keep your face on the road looking where you're going. You don't look sideways up the hill. And you certainly don't have pedestrians on that road. They wouldn't live. Brentford Parker Way was mentioned, and this is barely visible from the farm due to topography and distance. There's one little bit, 700 or 800 metres away, where you just see it. But it's going to be a very distant thing and be less prominent than the present buildings. There are indeed many bats in the village. I have some in my own house, and they're not endangered.
I'm afraid you're out of time. Can you sum up? Thanks.
Oh, really? Sorry. What I was going to say is the only objection has been from landscape. And the parish council has debated this twice, and we support the application strongly and would recommend it for approval by the DCC. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Mr. Cox? I don't see any hands. Thank you, Mr. Cox, very much for your contribution. And if we could have Mr. Mike Fowler speaking in support. Welcome to Development Control. When you're ready, the mic's already on. You'll have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to speak. My name's Mike Fowler, and I'm the architect for the application. As you can see, there are two reasons for refusal. The first one is landscape harm, and the second one is harm to the protected species, i.e. the bats. In connection with the landscape harm, the application was supported by an LVIA, which is Landscape Visual Impact Assessment, which has not been mentioned in the agenda. This was carried out by independent, unbiased landscape consultants. And their conclusion was the existing on-site built form makes no positive contribution to the character of the AONB, which is now National Landscape. The proposal for this new house is far less than what's already there. It's also supported by a robust landscaping scheme, which again has not really been mentioned in the agenda. For example, the size of the existing buildings on the site amounts to 1,700 square metres, and these are very large sheds together with the existing house. This is being replaced by 480 square metres of built form, which is about 28% of the existing buildings. The height of the new house is slightly higher than some of the barns and slightly lower than the other ones. And the impact of the new house, I would suggest, would be far less than what's already there. As you've heard, the buildings are genuinely redundant and they're in a state of decay. The second reason for refusal relates to protected species. You've heard about the update in connection with the mitigation, so I think that's gone away. But the second reason is that the officers feel there is no overriding public need for this new dwelling. I would argue that the existing site is not really typical of something you should see in the national landscape. It's a range of redundant farm buildings way past their best. And there will be a visual improvement to the site. I'm not sure whether the redundant buildings of this size enhance the landscape. With their demolition and new structural planting and a new dwelling, I believe this is for the public good, the public need. The new house will of course be energy efficient. And I repeat that 28% of the existing buildings will be occupied, or the size of the new house will be equal to 28% of the existing buildings. There are no neighbour objections, and the parish council supports the application. And that's all I can say, thank you.
All right, okay, thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Mr. Fowler? Councillor Rattigan.
Yes, on page 205, our tree officer has objected due to a lack of a tree survey. It's been noted already from the parish that the trees will remain. Have you got a root protection plan just to make sure that proximity of those trees is not affected by the development?
Yeah, unfortunately, the objection came from the first scheme. The second scheme is the building is far away from the existing trees. There is a root protection zone around each tree as part of the submission.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much for your contribution. Questions for officers? I see no hands raised. Okay, we'll move on to debate. Anyone? Councillor Faulkner?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would make a couple of points. My first view of this place was the site visit on Friday, and I must admit I was quite surprised by the sheer scale of what's there in the dilapidated state of what we saw. I mean, it's huge. But in the officer's comment in the update, I must take issue with some of the points there. In the first paragraph, it says the nearest dwelling is located 66 metres away. But it misses the point, there's already a dwelling there. So if this was refused, you'd have colossal area of dilapidated buildings plus the existing dwelling. But as the parish chairman mentioned, it talks about this being 1.8 kilometres away from Manor Farm. Manor Farm is on the ridge at 850 feet in Ashmansworth. This is 300 feet lower. But it's 1.5 kilometres from the village centre, downhill. It mentions it's on the crest of a hill, but it isn't. It's downhill. It's the last building down the hill from Ashmansworth. And that area of Ashmansworth, and it's got a 12th century church 500 metres up the road, that used to be Ashmansworth until the plague. And when places like Ashmansworth moved to the top of the hill, as did Old Berkeley, went up the hill to Berkeley, where they are today, in the belief that the plague wouldn't go up the hill. But this is the lowest point, not on the crest of a hill. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Chair. Fortunately, I was on the viewing panel on Friday, and I have to say the state of the farm buildings, it was quite appalling. Breeze block, dilapidation, poorly maintained, derelict. But I do think this rests on quite a lot of localism. We often cast our ears to what parish councils want and give them additional weight in our deliberations. It is rare that a parish council comes out so strongly in favour. If it is right that its impact on the landscape is so severe, then we must look at what is there now. The impact on the AONB as it stands, or natural landscape, as I will have to get used to saying, is colossal. And would one separate individual home make a better or a worse site? In my view, it would be for the betterment of the views, and therefore I have to go against the recommendation and say this is acceptable in my view. It has limited and almost no huge impact upon the AONB, and as we have worked out, there is an ability to ensure that bats and wildlife are protected, especially during the building time. The fact that no trees will be removed, I think, adds to that biodiversity gain. But obviously this is a blot, as I see it, on the landscape, and I think it should be removed for one single dwelling to improve not just the view from the wayfarers, because obviously the wayfarers starts in Councillor Bound in my ward in Kingsclere, but I think it will enhance all of the walking. You'll look back and see one home rather than derelict buildings with breeze blocks and dilapidation. So I'm happy to recommend approval.
So, for the avoidance of doubt, you're moving approval. Councillor Freeman?
To be honest with you, I've got no problems at all with the actual scheme, the house, because it's got to look a lot better than the run-down, dilapidated buildings. My main concern is the bats. And if we do decide to approve this, I do feel we need to put in a condition to make sure that those bats are protected and make sure that they're okay. Apart from that, I really don't see the issue with the actual building itself. My problem is with the bats.
Thank you. Councillor Durrant.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Freeman essentially stole my words without knowing it, but I am genuinely and very have strong concerns about the bat population.
Councillor Howard-Sorrell?
I have support in the room, apparently, because I was going to say the exact same thing. The only thing I was going to go a step further is, can we, this is possibly a question that should have gone to officers, but if we are going to approve it, can we condition that an expert is hired, rather than they just go and knock the building down with bulldozers, that an expert goes in first, removes the bats by hand so that none of them die? Because in this country there's, I think there's 18 plus 1 species of bats, and the plus 1 comes from the fact that there was another species and there was a house fire and only 1 survived. So once that 1 remaining sole bat from that species dies, it will only be 18. And it would be really sad if this entire colony was killed because they just drove over the building with bulldozers. Beyond that, also, I don't know if this can be secured by a condition. Possibly Anne can weigh in with a Section 106 option. Can we make sure that the bat boxes and the like that are secured with the, whatever it's called, the night and day, blah, 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 can they be legally secured as having to stay in place, because the owner could very well have just put them in to appease us and then remove them because they don't want bats on the site as soon as the house is built. So I would like to make sure that they are legally protected.
Okay, if we have a response on that from officers.
Thank you, Chair. So if I deal with the question first and then just come back with some advice on the point around bats in any case. So on the point of bat condition, yes, the mitigation can be conditioned. It can be enforced in that way. The retention of things after the first implementation can be enforced by condition, so that's no issue. And that could be conditioned simply against the mitigation that's been put forward by the applicant, which has been considered acceptable in terms of the potential mitigation point by the biodiversity officer. The issue that the committee would need to wrestle with, though, is in relation to, if I bring members' attention to page 215, the 3 derogation tests in relation to whether the bat should be moved in the first place, and it comes in 3 parts. So the first is the public interest test, and you've heard from the applicant their view on that. The second is that whether there's a satisfactory alternative that could be secured, and the third is whether overall the maintenance of the conservation status is maintained. So working through those, if committee were minded to approve, you would need to satisfy yourselves that the public interest is so significant that it meets that first test, that there isn't a satisfactory alternative, i.e. the only way of securing that public benefit that you've identified is through this scheme, and that effectively the demolition of the buildings will only occur in this particular way. And then the third point would be the maintenance of the conservation status, which would be the mitigation which we could secure by condition. So members would have to be clear on that front in terms of how the motion was put forward insofar as being satisfied that those derogation tests are met.
Okay, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's looking very much like this is likely to be approved, and the concerns pretty well all seem to centre around the bats. So I suggest that if it is approved, we do it on the basis that we delegate it to officers to make the final decision, subject to suitable bat mitigation measures being agreed with the officers. That'll save it ever coming back to committee.
So on the mitigation part, that is now been secured in the update paper, so that has now been reported in terms of the mitigation, so there wouldn't be any need to come back to officers on as of now, because that has now been secured in between the 2 parts. So that's what the update is now recording. It's more the fact that the committee would need to be satisfied those first 2 tests, the public interest test and the no suitable alternatives test, has been met before reaching that point of mitigation.
Okay, Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the site is dilapidated and the barns need work on them, and perhaps they are redundant in terms of the farm use. The house is not pretty, the one that's already there. However, I feel that unfortunately what is proposed will look totally incongruous in that landscape. And so, along with the bat, the points made about the bat, I will not be voting in terms of what's being proposed from Councillor Rattigan and whoever else seconded it. Thank you.
I'm not sure we have got a seconder. Do we have a seconder?
Hang on, Chair. Chair, I think Councillor Rattigan made a proposal, but I don't think his proposal dealt with the 2 tests that Mike's just laid out. So I think if you are going to propose it, Councillor Rattigan, you need to say what the public interest is, and you need to deal with the no alternative point, and we would have to give that as a reason for approval if it went through.
Thank you. I was trying to catch the chair's eye. I agree that we haven't dealt with those two issues. The sequencing of removal of the dilapidated buildings or current buildings, I think is important, and we ought to ensure that the BAT survey does the work to say where the colony sits, and if it's the removal of it, because we need to make sure that the public interest is held, and I think if you sequence it, then we know where the colonies are within the change to the site. I think that would be beneficial, and I think we would bring the public benefit along with us if we can detail the sequencing of the removals. I think that is right. And your second point, Anne, can I?
So, Councillor Rattigan, perhaps I can direct your, if you look at page 215 of the report, headed Public Interest, that is what you need to address. And the second point you need to address is no satisfactory alternative. So if you read those paragraphs and then... So you need to say why there is an overriding public need for the proposed replacement dwelling. Why?
Thank you for that clarification. Now, as we saw on site, the current building is less than energy efficient, and I think any home that's going to be built within that would obviously ensure that it is energy efficient. It uses all of the right materials, and during construction ensures that the landscape character in which this is being built is not intrusive. And I think that would meet the first test. And secondly, on the roofs, I think if we, as I said, if we can get a proper management plan of the removals, then we will know where the colonies sit, and I think that would be sufficient to ensure that the bat colonies are not compromised.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I think we need a lot more information, and I'm minded to ask for a deferral on it to get the information that we all need so we can make a proper decision on this. But you've got a proposal on the table already, so I can't move that unless Councillor Rattigan withdraws his proposal.
We don't have a seconder for the current proposal, do we? Councillor Rattigan, you happy to withdraw?
I'm happy to defer it on the basis that we would get to a point where everybody understands the public benefit and the mitigation of the bat species within the site.
Okay, I'll move deferral from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Robinson. So all those in favour of deferral, please show. Those against? Abstentions? Okay, well, I think that's carried.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we could have the confirmation decision, please.
Thank you, Chair. The application is deferred to seek more information in relation to the bat mitigation proposed, as well as the way in which the 3 derogation tests have been addressed.
It's almost the same place as the last one. Benefit against harm. You know, there is harm, there is a benefit. But
Okay, Councillor Howell, you had your hand up. We just had a decision.
I voted against deferral because I'm not entirely sure what information we're actually deferring to get, because the officers have already given their opinion on those tests. So they're not going to come back and say, oh, look, we found this new information that changes the outcome of those 3 derogation tests. So who are you going to go away and ask? I mean, I didn't get the opportunity to say that before we voted on the proposal, but there's no point in deferring if we already have all the information that the officers are willing to give us on those tests. We either need to vote for or against. And in the officers' view, and in my view, those tests haven't been met. So unless the officers can clarify that they have some magical source of information that they haven't yet tapped, and they're going to go away and then bring it back for the deferred motion, then can we reverse that and just vote on it now?
No, your colleagues have voted, so it's deferred, I'm afraid. We'll reconsider it at a future meeting. Right, item 5, Monk Sherborne Road Charter Alley. If we could have the officer introduction, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks to vary Condition 1, approved plans, and Condition 15, which is a biodiversity enhancement and management plan, attached to technical details consent granted under application 21022134 TDC. Draw members' attention to the update paper where written confirmation has been received from the applicant agreeing to the wording of pre-commencement conditions 6, 7 and 9, and there's some minor wording to conditions 17, 24 and 27. The TDC gave consent for 8 dwellings and the variation proposed under this current application comprises a number of minor revisions to the internal layouts, fenestration, addition of garages, which officers consider to be acceptable. The site layout access arrangement, together with the housing mix, would remain as previously agreed under the TDC. Condition 15 of that earlier permission required the submission of a biodiversity enhancement and management plan. This has now been submitted and therefore the condition seeks to be amended to state compliance with that. The proposal is recommended for approval with the conditions as amended in the update paper.
Okay, so we have nobody down to speak for or against this application or any ward councillors. Do we have any questions for officers, councillors? I see no hands. Okay, so we'll move on to debate. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. They're incredibly minor alterations, so I move the officer recommendation.
Excellent. A seconder. Councillor Court. Move to vote. Those in favour, please show. Okay. Those against? Okay, that's unanimous.
Just confirm the application is approved with the conditions in the main paper and the subsequent amendments in the update paper.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, moving on then to item 6, 2 Hydes Close, Whitchurch. If we could have the officer introduced, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a retrospective application for the removal of a hedge and erection of a fence. Just to clarify that the application was submitted on the basis of the fence measuring 1.9 metres in height. This includes the brick wall at the bottom which was there previously, which is approximately 4 metres in height. So the fence itself measures 1.5 metres in height. In terms of an update, section B of the reason for refusal has been amended to remove the reference to head of law and governance and purely relates to enforcement action to be taken. In addition, a third party has raised a number of clarifications. One point of note is that the agent refers to fences being noted in the Whitchurch Conservation Area Appraisal Management Plan. This is in fact in relation to picket fences of a low height as stipulated on page 4 of that management plan. Within the same paragraph, the management plan states, by contrast, close bordered fences are incongruous and visually intrusive in the conservation area. In any event, proposals are considered on a case-by-case basis, and there is an assessment of harm detailed within the report, which is supported by the conservation officer. It's recommended that the application is refused on its visual intrusion within the street scene and the negative impact on the character and appearance within the conservation area. It is recommended that enforcement action is taken where the applicant will be required to remove the boundary fence and replace this with a native hedgerow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have no objectors to speak. We've got Mr. Lassiter and Mr. Humphrey speaking support. Welcome to Development Control, Mr. Lassiter. The microphone button's to your right, and when you're ready, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Mr. Humphreys is ill, I'm afraid, so sends his apologies. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening, and thanks to those who were able to visit the site on Friday. I'd also like to thank the officers for including my recent submissions on the update paper. Given that these were wholly factual, I didn't anticipate a negative response, so if I may, I'd like to start by commenting briefly on the officers' response to my bullet points 1, 4, 5, 6 and 8. Regarding the height of the fence, I'm very surprised that officers have not simply admitted the error. The application form refers to a 5-foot fence. That's 1.5 metres, not 1.9 metres. And it's abundantly clear that the fence is of that height. The 1.9 dimension on one of the photographs includes the brick plinth, which is not part of the application. Regarding the conservation area appraisal, I refer to that document to counter the suggestion and an assertion in the report that there were no timber fences in the conservation area. The appraisal clearly recognises that fences do contribute to the character of the conservation area. Item 5, the examples that I gave are within the conservation area, and in the case of the weir, at the entrance to the conservation area. And rather than rely on Google Earth images, a site visit would reveal that the presence of the fence at Tacker's cottage, where vegetation has grown partly over it and partly hides it, and that's what we're proposing hides close. If he was here, Mr. Humphreys would also have mentioned the timber fence on top of the wall at the late Richard Adams' house in Church Street. In item 6, I pointed out that the hedge was not a native hedgerow as described, but was a leyland hedge. It may once have looked neatly manicured, but because it became diseased, and it became diseased before it was removed, and it did not make a positive contribution to the verdant character at that stage, which the officer refers. Item 8, regarding the appearance of the fence, I simply wanted to point out that it has changed and darkened in the 12 months since it was erected. Whether it is an anomaly in the street scene and whether that gives rise to harm brings me to the main point of this presentation, opinion. The relevant policies and guidance require subjective judgment. As members of this committee, you must make a subjective judgment based on what you have seen and read, and if you conclude there is no harm, you are fully entitled to approve the application. Your officers take the view that the fence causes harm to the street scene and causes less than substantial harm to the character or appearance of the conservation area. And given that alleged harm, they assert that the proposed fence conflicts with development plan policies and government guidance. I respect their opinions, but I fundamentally disagree, and I consider the fence to be an attractive addition to the street scene, having a neutral impact on the character or appearance of the conservation area and upon the street scene in this part of Winchester Road. The fence will continue to darken, and climbing plants which have been planted in the garden will soon grow over the top of the fence.
1 minute.
Thank you, to further soften and enhance its appearance. I therefore ask you to approve the application as submitted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Mr. Lattiser? I see no hands raised. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lattiser. Councillor Phillimore. I expect you know the drill by now. You've got 4 minutes when you're ready.
Evening, Chair. I'd just like to correct the update paper. I'm a borough councillor, not a parish councillor, but I was at the site visit. This call-in and site visit may at first instance appear vexatious. However, I, along with the applicant, his family, supporters, don't believe this to be the case. How have we arrived here? The applicant, a 91-year-old widower, correctly and conscientiously applied to fell 5 diseased lime trees in his garden, was granted permission to do so in November 2022. The attendant tree surgeon informed the applicant that his hedge was also diseased and advised him to address the matter. The applicant agreed to remove the diseased hedging and replace it with the extension of a fence contiguous to the one that was on the southern border of his property. The agent's already explained that it was it's not a 1.9 metre fence that's been erected. This is not the case, as the brick plinth was already in position, and it's just a fence panel 1.5 metres high. As the agent explained, there are already a number of fences of this type present within the conservation area, so to object to this particular one seems inconsistent and surely will result in an appeal should the applicant be unsuccessful. And that's all I've got for you.
Thank you very much. Questions for Councillor Phillimore? Councillor Howard Sorrell.
Thank you, Chair. The Town Council comment suggests that similar fencing is for properties outside of the conservation area. Is that not the case? Because you've just said that there are existing fences within the conservation area. So.
There are, and I thought the agent showed you examples of those. No, but I thought there were pictures as well supplied to you.
Any further questions? I see no hands raised. Thank you very much, Councillor Phillimore. Do we have any questions for officers? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. For everybody's benefit, can we just clarify where we measure the height of a fence from? Do we measure the height of a fence from the top of a wall, which could already be 4 feet high, or do we measure it from the ground to the top of the fence? Thank you.
So the 1.9 relates from the ground, but the brick on the brick bit at the bottom was an existing feature. So the element in question is the new fence, which is 1.5 metres in height. The confusion comes from it is in the application description that the fence is 1.9 metres in height, and it's stated on the drawings. But yeah, that's been clarified now.
Okay, so when we're judging something like this, the normal procedure would be made to measure from the top of from the ground to the top of the fence, irrespective of where the wall stops and the fence begins. It's the total height of the combination that we are judging in a planning application like this.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Any more questions for officers? Okay, debate. Any movers or seconders? Councillor Bound.
Well, I did go on the site visit, and I mean, rather like the photographs that we were in our pack, it stands out like a sore thumb as far as I'm concerned, right next to a hedge. And I can't quite see why it hasn't been suggested to the applicant that they don't just take down the fence, move it back, and plant a native hedging in front. That would seem to me to be the solution that would solve all the problems. So it seems a bit hard on the applicant, but I agree with the officer proposal.
Are you moving? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Core. Anyone else wish to speak before we vote? Okay, we'll move to vote. Those in favour of the recommendation, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those against. Okay, if we could have the decision, please.
Thank you. So that application is refused and will be required to comply with the enforcement action as per the as detailed within the report and the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, and next item is Corner House, Village Road, Weston Patrick. If we could have the officer introduction, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a household planning application for the demolition of the side extension and chimney stack and create a new dormer window, replacement of the existing single-storey extensions, and existing stables removed, and new 3-bay garage rising to 6 metres in height. It also includes the installation of an oil tank and air source heat pumps. In terms of an update, further noise calculations have been submitted relating to 2 air source heat pumps. Environmental Health have been consulted on this and confirmed that the noise calculations show that these air source heat pumps would meet the requirements of permitted development. As a result, condition 6 on page 287 of the agenda relating to the noise assessment is now not required to be included, and the removal of informative 4 relating to this has also been removed. The update paper includes the renumbering of conditions and informatives. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to conditions contained within the update paper.
Thank you very much. Do we have Karen Tipper for speaking? Objection? Welcome to Development Control. When you're ready, you have 4 minutes. Buttons on your right.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here this evening on behalf of my client, the owners of the Old Cottage, which is a statutory listed building and adjoins the northeastern corner of the application site. As members will be aware, the application has been subject to a number of amendments during the life of this application. Like many other residents, my client has submitted a number of responses to the various amendments made. Despite the effluxion of time since the submission of those comments, the content within those remains valid and should be considered. Whilst the application before you this evening has addressed my client's principal objection to the development, which was the demolition and replacement of the outbuilding, nonetheless, the previously expressed concerns regarding the 2 air source heat pumps and the oil tank remain. The air source heat pumps and the oil tank are proposed to be located external to the existing outbuilding, within 8 metres of the nearest part of the old cottage and just over 3 metres from the shared boundary with the old cottage. Whilst the submitted plans indicate that this plant is to be located behind a hedge, there is no guarantee that this hedge will be retained. The condition attached to the officer's report for a hedge relates solely to the southern boundary and does not relate to this part of the site. Given the generous size of the grounds associated with the application site and the proposed development under consideration this evening, there are numerous alternative locations where this plant could be sited without causing undue disturbance to my clients. For example, it could be located near to the proposed 3-bay garage. In terms of the potential for noise disturbance arising from the air source heat pumps, we do note that the recommended condition 6 has been removed as set out within the update list. The Environmental Health Officer has advised that the information provided satisfies the permitted development regime. However, the provision of 2 air source heat pumps is not permitted development, and the generic noise information provided is based on an assumed baseline. It does not take into account the quiet rural lane or the less acoustically efficient windows present within the old cottage, which do not offer the same attenuation modern glazing units would provide. It is imperative, therefore, that condition 6 be reattached so that a noise assessment is provided to include a real baseline assessment and not assumed baseline, as the applicant's submitted generic MSC calculation is. This would allow mitigation to be secured if necessary. Turning to the proposed oil tank, the report to committee this evening states that concerns raised in respect of the siting of the proposed oil tank and risk of theft is not a material planning consideration. This is incorrect. The MPPF at paragraph 92B clearly states that decisions should ensure development is safe so that crime and disorder and the fear of crime do not undermine the quality of life. Further, the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary have an appointed designing out crime officer advising on the built environment. Rural theft is a real issue, and an unsecured boundary where valuable fuel is to be stored invites opportunistic theft and in turn opportunities for crime elsewhere. Additionally, there is no mention within the application as to what measures are to be put in place to ensure that there is no risk of contamination from spillage from the proposed oil tank. Will the tank be internally or externally bundled, for example? Will this be controlled by further condition? All of these concerns could be appropriately addressed were the location of the air source heat pumps and oil tank to be relocated elsewhere within the very generously sized plot. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Do we have any questions? Okay, thank you very much. And in support of the application, I believe we have Miss Gina Toth and Max Wildsmith. Yes, please. Yeah. welcome to Development Control. When you're ready, you'll have 4 minutes between you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for letting me be substituted for my daughter who is suffering from COVID. Katie was born in Basingstoke and in fact went to nursery school in Weston Patrick, and this house, she hopes that her and her husband will be there for many years to come. I think, as the previous speaker inferred, they have consulted extensively with the neighbours. They have withdrawn the contentious element of this proposal, which was a redevelopment of the existing store and garage for the erection of a studio and office, so that no longer forms any part of this proposal. They have also decided to invest in even more insulation in the house itself, which means that they are able to remove the need for an oil tank. The reason for the oil tank originally was because the windows in the house are not that energy efficient, but by putting more insulation, they can actually remove the oil tank. With respect to the air source heat pumps, I think Basingstoke itself has declared a climate emergency. We've provided a large amount of evidence on the noise. The Environment Officer accepts that. I think it's deemed permitted development, and as obviously I agree that it should not really form part of this application. I have 2 air source heat pumps of the same size right outside my TV room. I've asked the applicants to come and listen to them when they're running. That invitation has not been accepted, but I can assure everybody here that I would not have positioned them there if I was concerned about the intrusion into my own house. Just like to clarify on the garage proposal, we obviously accept the condition 4 relating to approval of materials and finishes. The intention is for it to be a barn. It's a traditional Hampshire open barn type construction, oak frame with wood cladding. There has been some discussion about the ridge height. In our belief, the difference in levels between the road and the garage slab, along with the strong hedge line, means that only glimpses of the ridge will be seen from the road. I think both the Conservation Officer and your Planning Officer have concluded, and I quote, "The garage is consistent with neighbouring dwellings and outbuildings within the wider village area. There is a mix of ridge heights along the street scene, and the height of this proposal does not dominate the existing roofline, nor is it out of keeping with the context of the street scene. The current access is used for, has been used for horse-related activities with the stables, and there is no highway objection." So, in conclusion, I would hope that you would follow the officer's recommendation.
Okay, yeah, if you don't have anything to speak, I shall throw the floor open to questions from councillors. Councillor Howard Swell.
Thank you, Chair. So I might have missed something, but you mentioned that the oil tank isn't included anymore? Or?
Since we put the proposal in, we have to, there is an existing oil tank in the...
Can you use the mic?
There is an existing oil tank in the old store which is leaking and is dilapidated. So that is being removed, and we put in the requirement for an oil tank because the heating engineers that we were using told us the building was not energy efficient enough to be supported just with 2 air source heat pumps. But we asked them to advise us how much more insulation we would need to put in when we're doing the refurbishment in order to remove the need for the oil tank. So he has advised us we do not need the oil tank, so we won't actually be putting it in.
Okay, you can come back if you want to.
It's not a question so much as a comment, but that's not reflected in this application. So if we approve it, we're still approving potentially an oil tank, which is the concern of the neighbours.
Well, I'll leave that for the officers to deal with, but the fact is I don't think the oil tank, if it was there, would be an imposition on the neighbours anyway. It would be a brand new oil tank in accordance with regulations. The current oil tank, which is in the store, is a complete fire hazard. It's a leaking oil tank in a wooden store. I just put that forward because I thought it would be helpful, bear in mind particularly the authority's position on climate.
Okay, Councillor Bound.
Thank you. The height of the garage from ground level to the ridge height is how high?
6 metres.
Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, Chair. If you're not putting the oil tank in, and I'm sure Councillor Howard Sorrell is right in what he said, we'll clarify that with the officers in a minute, how are you topping up the heating to make the rooms a habitable temperature? Because as I understand, air source heating does not bring a room to a normally habitable temperature. Won't bring it up to 22 degrees, it'll only bring it up to about 16 degrees. So what sort of heating are they going to use to top it up?
The air source heat pumps will bring the median temperature up to 20 degrees. In our house, we have an immersion which backs it up. If once the air temperature gets below -3, the electric immersion just backs up the air source.
Any more questions? Thank you very much for your contributions. Questions for officers? Councillor Bound.
Could the officers tell me the height of the present garage, please?
Yes, that's 3 metres in height. 3 metres, yeah.
No more questions for Councillor Robinson.
If the officers could just clarify the situation regarding this oil tank, is it in or is it out?
It is proposed as part of the proposal, so it as currently stands, it's part of the application and it has been considered.
Okay, Councillor Howard Sorrell.
Is it possible that we defer with a suggestion that they alter the plans that they're submitting? Is that something we can do? Because if they're not including the oil tank, that might go some way to altering our decision.
Yeah. What you could do is, if you were minded to approve, if you were reached a decision on the rest of the scheme, and you could make that recommendation subject to the removal, amend the current description and plans to delete the oil tank.
Any further questions? Okay, I'll throw it open for debate. Councillor Robinson, followed by Councillor Godson.
Thank you, Chair. Whether the oil tank's in or whether the oil tank's out is, to my mind, is irrelevant, because I don't think the oil tank is actually a problem. I understand why it's been put where it is. The ground is very sloping. The last thing you want to be doing is pumping oil uphill to run any form of a heating system. So putting it on the highest point, ideally an oil tank needs to be about 1 metre above ground level to give you the correct oil pressure. So it's well screened, it's in a corner, you're not really going to see it, because you're not actually going to need to lift it off the ground much because it's already on higher ground. All the other things on this I'm happy with, except this garage at 6 metres high. As you come up that lane, the ground that this garage will stand on is significantly higher than the lane. You can already see the ridge of the existing garage, and to have another 3 metres on top of it is going to stick out in the landscape like a sore thumb. I can't vote for that. Everything else I'm happy with, but the garage really is a sticking point. Thank you.
Councillor Godson.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Councillor Robinson's taking the words out of my mouth, really. This application is in my ward. I have no concerns about the main body of the application. I have, as Councillor Robinson has described, very serious concerns about the height of the garage, which I
do feel will end up being a blot on its immediate landscape. And I would point out that the garage sits in a pretty substantial plot of land in its own right, and I see little reason why its footprint shouldn't be increased if they need to make more use of it, and the height kept down. So I don't feel able to approve this but simply because of the garage. Thank you.
Okay, are either of you prepared to move refusal? No. Moves refusal, Councillor Robin. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Godson, okay. Councillor Rackin, you had your hand up, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I was fortunate enough to go on the viewing panel, and in one of, as we moved away from the site, I looked back and could still see the garages outlined now. The idea that a 3-metre extension, or in terms of height, would be acceptable, I find quite appalling, actually. And the visual impact on something that huge would have a detrimental effect on the surrounding area. But also it would mean that the lane would be impacted too hugely by what is not a residential, the main residential accommodation, and I think is incongruous with what they're trying to achieve. The rest of the application, I think, is supportable, but for this point, which is substantive in my view, I cannot support it, and I will be happy to support the recommendation that's now on the table.
Okay, do we have reasons for refusal?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's EM1, B and C, which is visual amenity and scenic quality and important views in and out of settlements.
Can we get some officer clarification?
Yeah, just to remind members that the site is within the conservation area, and whether, from what I'm hearing from the comments made by members, particularly with reference to the impact on the character of the area, whether you wish to include, consider potential harm to the character of the conservation area. Is that part of your reasoning? And if so, then the relevant policies would need to be applied, which would be EM11.
Okay, so we have a move for refusal contrary to policies EM1, B and C and EM11. So EM1, B and C, visual amenity and intrusion. EM11, harm to character of conservation area. Okay, I think we're ready to move to vote. Okay, those in favour of refusal, please show. That's unanimous. If we could have the decision, please.
Thank you, and that application is refused for impact on character of the landscape character and impact on the setting of the conservation area. Thank you.
Okay, so item 8, Councillor Rattigan is removing himself from the chamber for this one. Hurst Community College. If we could have the officer introduction, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a full application for the creation of a 3G artificial turf pitch with fencing gates, storage container, floodlighting, hard standing and access. Draw members' attention to the update paper. 3 further letters of support have been received. The recommendation is for approval, subject to a number of conditions set out from page 311 of the main report.
Thank you. And do we have Tom Betts, Jane McLaren and or Nick Irwin? If you'd all like to approach, please. Welcome to Development Control. When you're ready, you'll have 4 minutes between you. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. I apologise for our colleague Nick Owen, who can't make it this evening. So I'm Tom Betts, and this is Jay McLaren. The proposal has demonstrated that it would observe relevant planning policies, which is necessary to ensure the sports facility is complementary to an educational setting, whilst being sensitive to residential amenity and properly preserving the local environment. As such, the project will ensure there is no harm by way of lighting, visual impact, transport issues or noise impacts. Focusing on these 4 items to highlight this level of care, the lighting proposal has been enhanced to protect local biodiversity and to ensure a sensitive lighting scheme for bats. Modern floodlights create little spill around the facility itself, and floodlights will not cast any spill light or glare into neighbouring properties. The development would be largely camouflaged and screened by substantial tree belts, as well as by school and sports centre buildings. These existing features will help to fragment, diffuse and block views towards the facility, benefiting neighbours and any onlookers. Increased traffic has been a source of concern, so the mitigation here is to arrange for school parking to be free for community visitors after the academic day, and to carefully manage community access to ensure that parking demand and supply is balanced. And concerning noise, the facility will create some sound, the sound normal when people play sport, but this effect would be reduced enough not to offend neighbours because of the generous distance between the facility and the closest residential properties. We can be confident that noise nuisance will not occur, especially when management plans are followed. So in summary, this proposal is in accordance with planning policies relating to character, amenity, biodiversity with the required net gain enhancements, landscape, sustainable transport, education, community facilities and health and well-being. Thank you.
As the head teacher of the Hurst School, the facility will be very well used by the school's 1,015 students, as well as local football clubs such as Tadley Caliva and AFC Aldermaston. These are our partner clubs for the project and are looking to enjoy a more local 3G pitch. It would support local teams to have good quality facilities, reduce their travel time and reduce the environmental impact of travelling long distances across Basingstoke and Deane to reach other facilities. This would benefit youth teams, senior teams, boys football and girls football, increasing health across the area. The proposal has been strategically identified by the Football Association as a centre for grassroots football development, reinvigorating the areas of Tadley and Borghurst. We already have a leisure centre in place adjacent to the proposed site, which is open to the community from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. weekdays evenings and 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. weekends, and so benefiting the community. It is already operational and ready to handle bookings, facilitate refreshments and parking. The pitch would also enjoy significant use during the weekdays at school. The pitch will replace a rather boggy field, which is utterly unusable during the winter months for our students. The pitch will allow activities in all weathers throughout the school year. Football is a favourite sport of the school, if not in the country, and I believe this facility would allow more participation in school leagues, as the pitch will be large enough to host fixtures at our school. The PE department are keen to grow participation, particularly of girls in the sport. They can put on new leagues, new activities to encourage these things across Basingstoke and Deane. It is their intention to host transition events with primary schools, inviting youngsters to use the pitch also during school days, and to grow fitness and involvement from younger children so that it does not just benefit our school, but our whole community. This project will have a very dramatic effect on the school and the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors, do we have any questions? Councillor Bell.
You mentioned that the present facility is open from 5 until 10. What hours will this new facility be operating?
It is up. The limit is till 10 p.m. in line with what the community facility is already offering.
And earlier at weekends, but I'm just trying to remind myself of sorry, an earlier closure time on weekends, but I'm just trying to find the paperwork to confirm to you what the weekend closing time is.
Can I come back? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so end of school until 10 o'clock at night, weekdays, and sometime in the weekend. You mentioned football, Caliva and another club. I know that they are in desperate need of facilities, but I think in the report it mentions rugby as well. So how does that come into it?
I think Tadley Rugby Club are keen to use it as a training facility, not a match facility, but a training facility for sometimes during the winter months also. But it will prioritise football.
Councillor Durant.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to get myself a quicker arm. That's all. I said everything I wanted to say. Thank you.
Any more questions? Any more questions?
Chair, if I may, the answer was the proposed closing time at weekends is 6 p.m.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your contributions. Questions for officers? I see no hands raised. Okay, so we'll move on to debate. Councillor.
I move the officer recommendation.
Excellent. And seconder, Councillor Faulkner. Move to vote. Those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. So if we could have the decision recorded, please.
The application's been approved.
Right. Welcome back, Councillor Rattigan. Without further ado, we shall move on to item number 9, 12 Messner Street, Popley. If we could have the officer introduced, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a full application for the change of use from a dwelling house to specialist housing, so still in residential use, still of a dwelling nature, for a mother and baby unit, home assessment centre and conversion of a garage into a habitable room. In terms of an update, the applicant submitted a rebuttal letter which was circulated to members on the 28th of November. The main material planning considerations of this letter have been covered in the officer's report. The application is recommended for approval subject to conditions set out as per the agenda paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have Mr. Ojo and Mr. Wilding speaking against. If you'd like to approach. Welcome to Development Control. When you're ready, you've got 4 minutes between you and the buttons on your right. Thank you. On the right.
My name's Ash Wilding. With me here is Mr. Timothy Ojo, and also with us here today, both in the room and also on the live web stream, are numerous residents of Messner Street and Irvine Crescent. We thank you for hearing us today. We first wish to express our collective frustration regarding how statutory notice has been handled for this application. No public notice was ever displayed in a prominent position nearby the property, and more than half of the properties that objected to this online never received postal notice either, despite being within a 50-metre radius of the property. On those grounds alone, we start to question whether the applicants have correctly done their due diligence. And indeed, we now raise to your attention the fact that Messner Street is part of the Everest Park estate, which is managed by Trinity Estates, and that all owners of property on that estate are subject to the covenants of the estate management company. Schedule 3, Clause 3 of which clearly states, and I quote, not to use the property except as a single private dwelling house. We have it in writing from Trinity Estates that the proposed change of use is not permitted and that they would consider the applicants to be in breach of covenant if they were to proceed. Furthermore, Trinity Estates have given us permission to speak today on their behalf, stating that they strongly oppose the proposed change of use and that they will be taking legal action against the applicants should they continue. We hope that that alone would be sufficient to reject this application today. However, we would also like to directly address the reasons for approval listed on the agenda. Point 1 suggests that the proposed development would not result in significant adverse impact to street scene and character. We challenge this on the grounds that the proposed development would not be the only non-C3 unit on the entire Everest Park estate, and that converting a residential unit to an institutional building on a quiet cul-de-sac will indeed impinge on the street's scene and character. Point 2 suggests that the proposed development would not result in any undue loss of privacy. We challenge this on the grounds that the property has direct lines of sight into many of its surrounding properties, and the stated use of the proposed unit will result in a continuous stream of new staff, patients and visitors having those direct lines of sight into our properties, thus representing a significant loss of privacy. Point 2 also suggests that the proposed development would not result in any undue disturbances. We are not satisfied by the applicant's claims that there will be no noise issues due to interior sound damping. There will always be up to 3 babies in the property at any one time, and as we all know, babies cry a lot. And even with interior sound damping, that noise will travel, especially during the hotter summer months when windows are invariably left open. And I want to point out that the adverse impact of that noise is very real. One of the families living directly next door to number 12 have a son who suffers from severe autism to the extent that he is visited by an external carer 5 to 6 times per week. He is easily triggered by new faces and loud noises. So the constant flux of staff, patients and visitors alongside the sounds of crying babies next door are expected to cause him serious stress and anxiety in his own home, thereby representing a significant undue disturbance to both him and his family. The increased vehicular traffic associated with that staff, patients and visitors mentioned just now neatly brings us to point 4 of the agenda, which itself already acknowledges that the proposed parking arrangements do not meet parking standards. We challenge the applicant's statement that parking demand is expected to be neutral simply by installing a bike rack in the garden. There will be 2 members of staff on site at all times, 3 patients and however many visitors during the day. And those visitors don't just include friends and family, but also midwives, health visitors and social care workers. This could easily amount to 8 or more cars needing to park at the property at peak times, but only 2 parking spaces in the proposed arrangements. It is therefore evident that a significant number of cars will need to spill over to parking on Messner Street, where parking is already at a premium and people are parking on the pavement. And therefore this poses a serious safety hazard to both residents and pedestrians. With all these points duly considered, we hope you agree to reject the application at this time. I also want to point out that I have my speech here signed not only by everyone here today, but also everyone who couldn't make it here today in person, strongly opposing this application. Thank you.
Councillors, do we have any questions? Councillor Bound?
Good evening. This is a 4-bedroom house, as I understand it. This is a 4-bedroom house, as I understand it.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. So in actual fact, there could be a large family in there with lots of children who would make lots of noise. If they were older children, they could have cars. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. However, I would point out that most properties that have babies, usually it's going to be maybe 1, maybe 2, and those babies grow. These babies are only going to be in the property for 12 to 16 weeks at a time, at which point they are rotated out and a new baby is moved in. Therefore, this represents a continuous level of babies being in there every day for the next foreseeable years.
My knowledge of babies is that they sleep quite a lot as well. They don't always cry, so you can't necessarily...
Is there a question in that, Councillor Pound?
So you would accept that babies do sleep a lot?
I would. I have a 10-month-old myself.
Sorry, we can't have would you accept. I'm sorry. That's the advice that's come from my left. Do we have any other councillor questions? Councillor Freeman.
Thank you. Can you clarify the part you were saying about how the estate management company have said this would be, if this was approved, it would be in breach of the agreement that they've signed?
Yes, so I was in contact with the management company today. I was speaking to the person at the management company, Trinity Estates, who manages the entire of Everest Park Estates, of which Messner Street is part. She has provided, so it's in my coat, but I have in writing from her that Schedule 3, Clause 3 explicitly says that you must not use the property for anything other than single private dwelling house. Therefore, they consider the applicants to be in breach of covenant if they proceed, and they will be raising legal action if they do proceed. And I can provide the emails for that if you need to see the specific wording.
Okay, it's a shame that nobody from Trinity Estates is here to voice those concerns. I had a question. Do you have private parking enforcement where you live?
Do you mean as in like resident permit only or something?
Yeah, or
No,
even
no,
fines by a private company if it's a... Okay, thank you. Okay, there being no further questions, thank you very much for your contribution. Okay, councillors, I've been advised that the covenant is not a material planning consideration. Do we have any questions for officers? I'm afraid not. I'm afraid the time for that's passed. Do we have any questions for officers? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Could we be talked through the real purpose of what this property is being used for? Why are presumably ladies, because it says a mother and baby unit, coming there? What sort of visitors are they likely to have other than healthcare visitors? Will boyfriends be visiting? What is the purpose? You know, why are they there? Are they vulnerable? Are they not looking after the babies properly? I just need to understand exactly what the usage is.
Yes, so the unit is for those vulnerable mothers who are struggling after pregnancy for a range of reasons. So this could be postnatal depression, other mental health issues, disabilities, who need help just getting on their feet for the first couple of weeks and having that sort of support. There are no units in the area. There is one in Winchester, but that's not always. In a lot of cases, these local people have to end up in places like Yorkshire and Manchester. So this type of accommodation is a severe need in the area. It's noted in the past year that out of 50 referrals of this service, 24 cases were closed with no placement made. 2 were placed in fostering parent and child placements, and 10 had to be placed outside Hampshire. So, you know, given that assessment given, it's considered that it's met criterion 1 of policy CN7, that there is limited provision for this type of accommodation, and that the local community would significantly benefit from this type of referral service. Yeah.
Okay. We'll move on to debate then. Anyone wish to start things off? Councillor Howard-Sorrell.
Thank you, Chair. I have a lot of sympathy for the residents and for the applicants, because this does sound like it would be a great facility for the town and for the area at large. I come at this from a unique perspective in that I used to live on Messner Street, about 30 metres away from this, and I can attest that the parking is less than ideal on that road. Unfortunately, highways haven't given us an opportunity to refuse it on those grounds, based on their own assessment, just because of my anecdotal evidence. I can't use that, sadly. I'm still leaning towards refusal for other reasons, mainly the impact on the neighbours in terms of noise and and such like. I'd like to hear what other people have to say, because having heard what this is for and the demand for it, I'm really reticent to refuse it, but I think we have to. But let's see what other people have to say. I'm not moving anything currently.
Okay, any other speakers? Councillor Godson?
Thank you, Chairman. I think we all have sympathy, and we all accept the fact that these sort of facilities, there is a requirement for these sort of facilities. Whether it's a good idea to put them into a heavily, densely populated area, I think is slightly worrying. I'm not sure this is an ideal sort of location for this kind of facility.
Councillor Faulkner?
Thank you. Now, a concern I have is I don't really know anything about this environment of social care, welfare. I have these sort of concerns that the applicants it seems are people as opposed to a corporate body. Now, if you're going to move people who are vulnerable, etc., like this, it needs an awful lot of legalese and stuff to go around it to make it, I would imagine, a bona fide operation. And so I wonder if this is really, say, a proper commercial operation that you can, at the end of the day, for instance, sue, but have to conform to all sorts of laws and regulations on public health, etc., etc., as opposed to just people who are wanting to do something nice for the community, but are really not qualified to do it in a residential location. I just find it overall quite strange.
Okay, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I think that what somebody is trying to do here is very laudable. So I think I'm very much on the line of Councillor Howard Sorrell with this, that it's obviously needed, but I don't think this is the right place for it. Fundamentally, we're looking at an HMO. We are going to house 3 or 4 families in a house that was designed to house one family in an area that is surrounded by single occupants, or single families. It's not right. Also, they're never going to settle there. The very nature of this facility is people will not settle there, so they will never engage with the local community. They'll never be part of that community. It's just the wrong thing in the wrong place. And I look at the reasons for approval, and it actually cites EM10 as a reason for refusal. And I think EM10 is the exact reason why it should not be there. It seeks high quality development, is EM10, but it also says that it should contribute to the provision of neighbourhoods and be well connected, function well in practical terms. It's not going to do that. It also should respect the local environment and amenities and neighbouring properties. Well, it doesn't do that. So I think the very reasons that have been put forward in EM10 are completely and utterly wrong. I think EM10 says this should not be here. It should actually be somewhere else. And I will move for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have a removal for refusal. Councillor Bound, did you want to come in? Okay. Councillor Hussey? You're leaving it as well. Okay, so we have refusal moved on the grounds that it's contrary to policy EM10 in terms of contribution to the neighbourhood and respect for neighbours. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Rattigan. Yeah, we'll have the officers coming at this point.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to seek clarification on the reason put forward in the motion. Reference is made to EM10, and if I've understood it correctly, Councillor Robinson, it is on sort of three sort of main areas that the change of use wouldn't effectively be in keeping with the character of the area in terms of high quality development. You mentioned impact on neighbouring amenities, and I'd just clarify, is that in relation to the actual use of the building itself, or the comings and goings associated with it, or both?
Both.
Okay, yeah.
I think it was right now, so it's EM10 yeah, I think basically, and we could add 2E, which is parking provision, because I think there is going to be a lot of coming and going of traffic on this, visitors traffic. So I think that could. I think that would be a fair comment as well, without trying to overload it with all sorts of other reasons.
That's fine, Councillor. Just on the parking one, that would be a separate reason for refusal in relation to policy CN9.
Yeah.
Okay, so contrary to CN9 with parking, EM10 2 and 2E for reasons already mentioned. Anyone else want to contribute to the debate at this point? Councillor Bound?
I will come in, because as far as I'm concerned, it's a 4-bedroom house. There could be a lot of noise, a lot of coming and going, a lot of traffic associated with this building. There's been talk about it not being a sort of an official establishment for a mother and baby unit. I don't think that will be so. It's going to have some, come under social services somewhere. As far as I'm concerned, this is a good proposal, and I see no why it shouldn't go forward.
Okay, so we have a proposal on the table that has been moved and seconded. So we shall now move to vote. All those in favour of refusal, please show. That's a majority. 7. Okay, those against? 3. Abstentions? 1. Okay, can we have the decision, please?
Thank you. So that application is refused based on the development being contrary to policies EM10 and CN9 of the local plan. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. So that's the end of the planning applications, but we do have another agenda item, which is the quarterly planning appeals report. So can we have the officer introduce, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the quarterly appeals report, and members will be familiar with the format now in terms of what it sets out. It sets out in Appendix A the appeals of particular relevance that have been received, appeal decisions in this quarter, and then in Appendix B, all other decisions. I'd just like to spend some time in relation to Appendix A, and in particular the decision in relation to the Red House. And I draw attention to it because it was an application that came before the committee. It was controversial at the time, and it was one that ultimately we lost at appeal. So the appeal was loud, and we did have costs awarded against the council on the basis of effectively the inspector saying there weren't any good grounds to refuse the scheme. And I include in the report of paragraph 1.4, and I will just read the paragraph briefly because I think it is a good summary of what we collectively as the LPA need to consider. The inspector effectively said, whilst the application for planning permission was refused on planning grounds in the context of consideration of considerable local opposition, I'm not satisfied the decision was made reasonably based on evidence that was available to councillors. In making its decision, there is no evidence to suggest that the council considered the loss of the pub in the context of the evidence relating to the alternative provision in the town, attempts to improve the business, or the robust marketing exercise that was carried out. I therefore find that the council's decision to refuse the planning application was unreasonable. And we've talked in training before about where we can be found to have acted unreasonably. That can be simply the case that we've refused something without significant or substantive grounds to do so. The other aspect that I think this really draws out is that it's not just a case of necessarily finding a particular fault with an application, it's the case of having to consider all matters in the round. So it's all the pros and cons, the evidence for and against something before deliberating and coming to a decision. So I think it was one just particularly highlight as part of this appeals quarterly report. As I say, the rest of the decisions are in there, and if there are any questions on those, have to take those now or outside of the meeting.
Do we have any questions now? I think there's no hands up, so I guess that's it. That concludes the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance. Report noted. Report was noted.